Welcome to Old Classic Car, and in this video something a little bit different for a change. In this one I am winding the clock back to 1991 and the hunt for an original Citroen 2CV. And firstly, a big thanks to David for sending me over his story. I've known David for 20 odd years now, and he, like me, is very keen on original untouched barn find cars, and he and a friend hatched a plan to go over to France in September, I think, of 1991 and go hunting down and see if they could find a nice original 2CV to bring back here to the UK. Now, he likes the older cars, so a proper French-built 2CV, and he wanted one untouched and as original as possible. This video is a combination of a write-up which David kindly sent me, and I'll be narrating this in a moment, and some great old home movie clips, plus some photographs as well from back in 1991 when their hunt for this 2CV actually took place. I think at one point they were probably pretty close to giving up, because even though 2CVs were made in great numbers, finding an original untouched one probably wasn't all that easy, and this is 30 odd years ago, so can you imagine what it's like now? And yeah, well, this is the story of their hunt, and let's crack on with the write-up here. In September 1991, my friend Jim and I planned a trip to France. He had friends who owned a property in the medieval village of Conques in the Aillon department in southern France, and this was to be our base for a few weeks or so. My goal was to find an old Citroen 2CV, a car I once thought very little of until a friend of mine convinced me otherwise, letting me drive his fairly elderly example both on and off road, and this is when I discovered what a capable little piece of machinery they are. The notion of finding an elderly 2CV in the UK was quite limited even back in 1991. And we assumed that France would have a plentiful supply of these iconic cars. This, however, was not the case, and during our drive down to Conques, in Jim's Citroen BX, which he drove with great enthusiasm, we saw only a handful of 2CVs, and these were all quite late models that were made in Spain. The earlier cars were made in Paris, and this was definitely one of the criteria we wanted to meet. During the first 2 weeks of our stay, we went on various sorties trying to find what by this time was becoming somewhat elusive, and we were now having thoughts that we wouldn't find one at all. However, during a visit to a nearby town of Marcillac-Vallon, while walking through the old town, Jim spotted an old doorway a little ajar, which he duly investigated. He called out, "Dave, look!" As he entered the building. Trouble was, a local had spotted us, and was at the same time calling out, "Monsieur, monsieur!" There was indeed an old 2CV tucked away at the back of the building, and we explained to the local gent what we were trying to achieve, and subsequently found out who owned the car. The register keeper had passed away some years previously, which is probably why the car was still there. We got in touch with the son of the owner, and after some negotiations managed to secure a deal and became the owner of the 2CV. It was a 1960 425cc AZ model and had been laid up since 1981, 10 years residing in the building, which had taken its toll and was by no means roadworthy. So, we employed the local garage, H. Peugeot, to get the car running. The car was dragged out of the building, and Monsieur Peugeot set to with some fresh fuel, and after scarring it with a 12-volt start, the old car burst into life. Stage 1 completed. We now had to get the car into some sort of roadworthy condition, as part of our plan was to drive our find back to the UK. We explained this to Monsieur Peugeot and said we needed to leave in the next few days, and his response was, "No, ce n'est pas possible." Parts for these older cars were now not available from Citroen, and we certainly needed an exhaust and some lighting bits, etc. So we were now faced with a bit of a dilemma. This was resolved by going to the local supermarket and buying quite a few bottles of vin, then returning to the garage and handing over our gift. The trick worked, and Monsieur Peugeot sourced the required parts and got the car ready for its journey back to the UK. The car had only the basics in place, so was probably, in hindsight, not as roadworthy as it could have been. I hadn't driven it at all until we were all but due to return. I remember the first 50 yards or so and thinking, what have I done?
Vas-y. Yep.
Le tender ici. Le tender.
Dans le carton.
Dans le carton, nous. Dans le...
Et voilà, monsieur le mécanique.
Dans le carton.
A little check. The start of the journey back to Calais in Grand Bretagne. Au revoir, monsieur.
Front drive shafts were somewhat worn, as were the shock absorbers, so cornering was interesting, to say the least. But we were committed now. A journey down to the local river, the Lot, for its first wash in a decade, made the car look a little more presentable. And a day later we set out on our journey back to the UK, approximately 600 miles to Calais. The drive took 2 days, with an overnight stop halfway. Jim was chaperoning me in his Citroen BX. The little car performed admirably without any breakdowns. We had brought a tow rope and a few tools just in case of emergencies, but these remained unused. I had to pay £5 VAT at the English customs, but was happy to do so. An overnight stop in Kent was followed the next day with a drive home, which at that time was in Shropshire, so another 250 miles, again without mishap. What a journey! It may have been slow, but one of the most rewarding trips I have ever made. In May 1998, the 2CV returned to France for the 50th anniversary celebration meeting held just outside Paris. Saturday saw an exodus of hundreds of Citroen 2CVs filling up the Champs-Élysées in a most bizarre weekend, but again the little car ran without a fault. I still have the car. All I've done over the years is serviced it and replaced the odd item that you'd expect, exhausts, brakes, etc. So the car still retains its character with old scratches and dents, and is a delight to drive. So there we go, that is the story of David and his 2CV mission way back in 1991. You'd think they'd be quite easy to find in France, original untouched 2CVs, but clearly even 30 odd years ago that was not the case. If you've actually been on the channel for a little while, you may remember I did a video touring around, well, I've done actually 2 videos touring around France, hunting down interesting old cars, and we did actually spot a super original 2CV, very similar to David's, in a little square in a tiny little village close to where we were staying. So perhaps I should have left a note on it. I mean, of course, the Citroen 2CV story, that goes right back to the 1930s when various prototype cars were developed, and they were all set to go into production towards the end of 1939, but of course events in Europe changed those plans, and the idea to put the 2CV on sale definitely went on the back burner of the prototypes. A few of them were hidden away in farm buildings, some of them were actually discovered not that long ago, and others were scrapped. But once the war was out of the way, thoughts of putting the 2CV into production were back on the table again, and it was introduced at the 1948 Salon de l'Automobile in Paris, the French motor show, in 1948, and it was in production right through, I think, until the beginning of the 1990s. Few updates over the years, but there was no mistaking a Citroen 2CV. So thank you very much for watching this particular video. Big thanks to David for sending the video footage over and his write-up, and indeed all the old photographs of his wonderful car. It's a car I've known, and I've known David for over 20 years now, so I've known that car for quite a long time. So thanks for watching. Please check out some of the other videos here on the channel, and there'll be loads more videos along very, very soon. So bye for now.